A very generous, warm welcome. Always good to be back with you. I send greetings from Jeannie. She is up at Sewanee this weekend and is just finishing a training of coordinators for EFM. She's leading this training, so she could not be here with me today, but she sends her love to all of you. And I know that part of the recent history of the Rector's Forum has been to share stories of prayer. I believe something along that line. And I was thinking about that in terms of what I might be led to share with you today. In our prayer book, the definition of prayer is telling. In fact, it's a very hopeful definition and a new way of thinking for many of us who think of prayer as kind of going off in a corner and kneeling down and talking to God. The definition of the Catechism is that prayer is responding to God with or without words in thought and deed. It's a wonderful definition, and it's a very engaging way for us to think in terms of how we live a life of prayer. In some ways it's heartening because it makes more sense to me when I understand that St. Paul called us all to pray without ceasing. And to pray without ceasing sounded just exhausting. But when I began thinking about prayer as responding to God, then in other words, it kind of said living my life becomes a prayer. And that seemed to make more sense to me in terms of a way to be engaged with God and engaged with one another throughout our lives. So with that in mind, what I'd like to share with you today is something I'm going to try out on you. This is the first large group that I've shared this with. I have shared it with some individuals before, but it is a part of what folks are going to hear at convention. Some of you may know the man Eric Law. Does that name ring a bell for anyone in here? Okay, I see a couple of names, a couple of hands. Eric Law became well known among Episcopal seminarians as a person who offered a new way to do anti-racism training. And the anti-racism training of the Episcopal Church had for so many years been very focused on the relationships of blacks and whites. And Eric is a Chinese American. He's a priest, lives in Los Angeles, and he wrote a book called The Lamb Will Lie Down. The wolf will lie down with the lamb, and of course picking up on that biblical image of the peaceful kingdom. And in that context, he shared a lot of material that was beyond the more conventional way of doing anti-racism training. In other words, he moved us more into thinking in terms of multicultural training as we realize in looking around that it is more nuanced. Certainly there are issues to be addressed around black-white relationships, and Memphis and our community certainly, and in the South in general, certainly know the reality of that. But Eric's work, his initial work, was focused more along the lines of becoming aware that each one of us brings something to the conversation. Whatever it is that you have, and this would be his image to describe this, below the waterline, sort of thinking of iceberg, whatever's below the waterline is where we carry a lot of the things that happen in our lives, those things about which we are to pray. And so he would say that you could see people coming together and they talk a good game, and I think in fact intend a good outcome, but as they come together and try to appreciate the differences, instead of coming together and being able to do that and embrace one another readily, all at once there begins to be a tension that gets built, and his image is it's the stuff under the waterline, the iceberg, that's actually hitting the tip up here. It looks like you're coming together, but you keep bouncing back. So it's a good image and not new, but one worthy of consideration, with the caveat that he says, and everybody brings something below the waterline with them. We all have stuff. To use technical language, we all have stuff. Okay, so that's the way I was first introduced to Eric Law. And seminaries, four of the Episcopal seminaries, greetings. Four of the Episcopal seminaries, in fact, focus on that particular book of his, and use that for their alternative to the anti-racism training. It's a multicultural training, and I had served on the Episcopal Church's anti-racism committee, and we now have moved to recommending using Eric's work in diocese as an alternative. You can use either the traditional training that we've had in the past or his work. Now, having said that, we're moving now to a new place, and he has moved in a different direction with the group that he founded, which is called the Kaleidoscope Institute, hence the different colors and the different shapes and the different sizes and how everything fits together in a kaleidoscope. But Jeannie and I went to a conference that he led over the summer. And for me, it's life-changing. And the reason it's life-changing is that it gave me, sort of like that definition of prayer that I shared with you a moment ago, a different way of understanding something that up until that point, I must admit, I just thought about it in a fairly narrow way. What he has done in his latest book has come out, and it's called Holy Currencies. Holy Currencies. And for every parish and mission in the diocese, I'm giving one of those to each parish and mission in the diocese at convention. They will receive that. What Eric has proposed, and it fits in with your stewardship emphasis right now, is to think in new ways about the resources that you have. To think about it in new ways and to apply those in new ways so that you begin to move out of, and this may not be as much the case here at Grace St. Luke's, but I can assure you this is the case in many of our parishes and missions, not just our smallest parishes and our smallest missions, although it might be sort of underscored there. But in those situations, the mindset is scarcity. They are very aware what they don't have, and usually that's expressed in terms of money. Okay? And so what Eric has done is he's presented a different way to think about, and I would invite you into that process of thinking about the resources that in fact we do have in our lives, and then how we bring those to bear, most especially for those of us, given our communities of faith, within our faith setting. So he starts by talking about the notion of currencies. And currencies really came in fairly. John Locke, the thinker, the philosopher John Locke, is the first one really to use the word currency and apply it to money. We tend to think about currency now. It's in the common parlance that when we think about our currencies, we tend to think money. But Eric shared from out of his Chinese American background and observed that in his culture, in that Chinese side of his culture, okay, money is often described as water. It's described more in terms of a current. It's described more in terms of something that is moving, and it is only useful if it's moving. If it's moving around, currencies have value. But when they're just sitting and not doing anything, it's not unlike the person who buried the talent. It's just sitting there, okay? And until it's invested, it doesn't have usefulness. So with that in mind, he started talking about money, but out of that original idea, he began to expand his thinking. And this is the part that was new to me. He said, I'd like to suggest that there are at least 6 different kinds of currencies, holy currencies. Okay? And he says, yeah, money's one of them. We'll come back to that. But he said that there is the currency of time and space. That's one currency. There's the currency of gracious leadership. There's the currency of truth-telling. There's the currency of wellness. There's the currency, let's see if before my artery slams shut. Get one going. It's always the danger of doing this without notes, but I want to do this because I want this to just be part of me. Like I said, I'm trying this out on you a little bit today. Okay. So we have time and space, gracious leadership, wellness, truth-telling, relationships. That's one not to overlook. Okay, and then money. And instead of thinking of them linearly, like we tend to say, well, you know, you start something and it just flows until there is no more of it, and that's the problem. It flows until there is no more of it. He thinks that the goal that he's trying to encourage us to think about how we use these currencies in our common life, the goals are twofold. One is sustainability, and the other is that it will be missional in focus. So that instead of, as he said, you know, a lot of people when they think about sustainability don't tend to talk about mission, and when they talk about mission, they don't tend to think about sustainability. So it's how to get those together. How do you make something work for the sake of the gospel within a Christian context? How do you do that while at the same time setting it in motion in such a way that it's not going to just peter out when the resources are gone? So it's bringing all this to bear. And if you will, think, instead of thinking linear, think more cyclically here. And in each of these areas, each of these currencies, he'd say it's almost like a door you could go into. You could come in any of these doors and start with that door and see where it takes you, but ultimately you have to engage all 6 of them for a ministry to become sustainable. It may be missional, but for it to become sustainable, you're going to need to engage all 6 of these currencies. So I think it's a very fascinating way to think about, in a new way, that there's a lot more that we have been given, gifted by God, than we often use as we're thinking about setting up programs. His argument, Eric's argument, is that we need to focus less on program development and more on people development. Focusing more on how we generate from within ourselves an awareness that we are gifted people and we can do something with that. So once again, it obviously ties in with a stewardship theme, because it really is about a way of living our lives. Or once again, if we define prayer as responding to God with or without words in thought and deed, it's a way of living life within praying without ceasing, as using those gifts that God has given us. So with that in mind, kind of just go through these just a bit and maybe give an illustration of a couple of them. There's a little church here in town called All Saints. And All Saints is out on Sherry, help me, what's the name of the street? Quince, thank you. And it's out on Quince, and it's sitting on this corner. It's a pretty good site, okay? But not much going on there. And I mean, they're quick to tell you that. They in fact, they're frustrated. They want to do something, but they don't know what to do. Bishop, we've tried that, it's just like whatever it is you suggest, we've tried that. But recently they tried something they hadn't tried before. They decided they were going to risk, for them this was a risk, and they decided to open up their parking lot, time and space. They decided to open up their parking lot and use the parking lot for a farmer's market. Well, this was new to them. This was edgy for them, okay? So they did this. Now, I'll have to say, what really drove them initially was the air conditioner and the heater went out at the church. And they thought by having a farmer's market, they could make enough money to pay for it. I said, farmers markets are not going to pay you anything. That's not the point of having a farmer's market. The point of having a farmer's market on that highway right there as you're driving down Quince, okay, as you're driving by there, people are driving by every day at 35, 45 miles an hour, and that nobody's stopping, but the church is still there. The building's still there. The idea is to get people to come onto your property. The resource they have, the currency that they have is place. Place. So what they have done, they started out to do this as a very temporary 6-8 weeks, and then we're going to close it down. And 2 weeks ago they announced we're going to keep doing this. Okay? Because what they came to understand is the value, the currency, the benefit was not in raising money to pay for the heater and the air conditioner that went out. It was in relationships, the other currency. By getting people from the neighborhood to come on their site, all at once they had an opportunity to get to know the neighborhood. And that's the first time that's happened there in a long time. Now, have they done it perfectly? Is it complete? Is they fit it? No. No, it's just getting started. But they're learning that to engage the currencies that they have with the missional, sustainable ministry that they want to have, it's going to require the hard work and attention to taking advantage of the resources that are there. Bishop, we don't have much money. We're burning through our the little money we've set aside. I said, well, then do something else. Okay? And the farmer's market's what came out of that. It's a start. It's a good beginning. And I think it's a way to begin to connect for them into relationships. Now, relationships is really at the heart of most anything that we do together as a community. But within the context of relationship, my My hope in that setting is what's going to happen is as they begin to engage the neighborhood, and that's scary for them, to begin to engage the neighborhood using gracious leadership skills. There are some people in that parish that are good leaders. They're good at meeting people. They can invite people in. That's not everybody's gift, but there are so few that can do that, who can go out and be brave enough to go out and meet with people on the parking lot and talk with the people on the parking lot and invite them to share with them, we're here, been in this community for years now. Glad to have you over here. By the way, we have service on Sunday, and we're collecting from anybody who comes today your prayers. Is there something you'd like for us to pray about for you? That's all. I mean, we're not inviting them in necessarily. We're just saying we'd be honored to offer prayers for you this coming Sunday. Okay? So if in fact that's the case, then somebody gives the name of someone and says, well, also we're going to be offering it this Sunday. Now, if you'd like to come to the service, you're welcome to be there and hear us and join us in offering those prayers. But it begins with relationship building. The relationship building ultimately in that setting is going to have to address an issue that I believe is a critical issue, and the Episcopal Church may be uniquely positioned to address this among mainline religions. And that is the issue of truth-telling. In that neighborhood, there are very few people who go to the Episcopal Church. I don't know why. I have some hunches about it. I look around and I drive, and I've done this. I've driven through the neighborhood. I have gone over and I have walked streets of that neighborhood just to look and see. I've walked through the business sections adjacent to that neighborhood and trying to come to understand from those visual cues what it is that might be a resource, a currency that is in the business community or a need that's in the business community. Now, this is an unusual place to start because Episcopalians tend to like to build a church and have us start having worship services, and that everybody who knows enough to want to be an Episcopalian will come for that reason. I'm suggesting that there may be a different doorway here that needs to be looked at by many of our churches, and that doorway in this particular situation is about relationships within the community and finding out what the community needs, rather than trying to say, we're here and we offer worship, come and be like us. It's more challenging that way, but it's also more honest. Because the truth is, the Episcopal Church is a wonderful expression of Christianity, if you understand that. But if you don't understand it, many people don't even know the Episcopal Church is Christian. And you laugh, and I laugh too, but I can tell you, I was at All Saints, and I'll just stay with my illustration. I was at their vestry meeting the other night, and that's exactly the story that many of them told, in different ways. And I finally had to say, well, I must confess, my mother, who's Southern Baptist, when I told her I was going to an Episcopalian, she said, well, that's nice, Don. Do they read the Bible? I promise you, okay? And so it's not stupidity, it's ignorance. If you don't know, you don't know. So what we're doing is finding a way to connect with people in relationships, and then if you can get to that place, then you can begin to do some truth-telling, because there are people in that neighborhood who are different from one another. That's why Jesus said where 2 or 3 are gathered together, and where 2 or 3 are gathered together in his name, he's in the midst of us. It's a good thing, because we don't agree. We need him in the midst of us, okay? I mean, that's the iceberg stuff we talked about earlier. That's what keeps banging up against one another under the surface. So the truth-telling begins to be an opportunity for the church to sit with the neighborhood. Not that there is a distinction, but there certainly is functionally a distinction until we get blended together. It's not that the idea and the goal is not to eliminate the differences, it's to learn to appreciate the differences. It's to learn to appreciate that God has gifted each one of us in different ways, and that's what we get to bring to the table. So anyway, you see how this begins to play together. You have a place, you invest time and space there. You have relationships. You have gracious leadership, truth-telling, and wellness is a good one. I see Lee over there, and I think of the Church Health Center and so thankful for that ministry. I mean, you talk about a sustainable type model. In fact, we've invited Eric Law to come to the diocese, and we're going to take him to the church health center to get a tour, because it's not the only one, but it comes pretty darn close to missional sustainable ministry within our community. In fact, Eric is not going to be our keynote speaker at this year's convention in another couple of weeks, but he is coming the next year, is going to be our keynote, and is leading a conference the week before that for those that would like to know more about Holy Currencies. So this is something, like I said, I'm making an investment in this of my time and of some of the diocesan money to support this effort, because I think it raises possibility and it raises hope, where in the past people have only felt their scarcity and helplessness. And if I can give me somebody with a little hope, and I can come up with an enabling mechanism to help them get there, we can accomplish something together. So I think it's an exciting scene. Now, wellness is one of the currencies that he shares, and he's talking in each of these examples of currency. Each one can have sort of an internal component and an external component. Wellness could be described as the health in terms of the social health, the economic health, the emotional health, the ecological health, the physical health, and the spiritual health of a congregation, or stepping outside the door of the community in which the congregation is placed. And it may well be, and I had this conversation with Little Church, Ravenscroft, but you didn't even know we had a Ravenscroft, but up in where Ravenscroft is, but Ravenscroft Chapel. And I had this conversation with their vestry 2 months ago. And after listening to it, and we talked about wellness, and I talked about a health clinic, a free clinic. Two of the women are nurses. They said, oh, we can do that. I mean, that's what's happened. We can do that. It's like it frees people to think in new ways about the currencies that they have. And so these two women have said, we're going to offer a free clinic in that community, because there are a lot of people around there that don't have access to good medical care. I mean, it's that kind of thinking. It's just a new way to connect. So you can either offer it because within the church community itself there's a need for wellness, or at least getting healthier, or you can offer it outside the church, or both. And each of these characteristics, each of these currencies, as I say, has an internal and an external characteristic about it. Then finally, it takes us back around to the one that we sort of started with, and everybody assumes that that's what we're talking about when we talk about currency, which is money. Okay? And Eric doesn't deny that you need money. No question about that. But even with money, he has a new way of thinking about things. And this one's really kind of cool. And I will tell you, he doesn't just talk about it, he lives it. The Kaleidoscope Institute, which is the group he started a number of years ago now, runs on the basis of what he calls grace economics. Okay? You sign up for their workshop. There is no amount that is required to be paid. You pay what you can. Now, he also says, this is our requested amount, but pay what you can. You will not be denied the services because you can't afford it. Okay? And by the way, if you're in a position where you can pay a little bit more, you'll help somebody else because they can't pay that much. That's a different way to structure. All I can say is that ministry, which started in the Diocese of Los Angeles, cost the Diocese of Los Angeles not one penny. They have grown by 700% their cash flow. That's what pays for that ministry. They do the same thing with their books that they sell. The request was on the Holy Currencies book, pay what you can. We suggest a donation of $20, but pay what you can. I paid a little bit more than $20, so every parish in the diocese and mission in the diocese will get a copy of that book. And I'm able to contribute to their grace economics model because it helps offset for somebody who can't afford it but needs the information. It's a different way of thinking. That's really the exciting part about this for me. It energizes me. After 12 years as your bishop, I'm finally thinking, are there some way that we can organize to go forward with new and exciting ministries that are vital, sustainable, missional ministry for the Episcopal Church in West Tennessee. And I think this model is helpful to me. So anyway, that's a quick overview of it. I don't know how I am on time, but that's what I want to throw out. Any reactions, suggestions, pushback, or thoughts on that? And have you seen that happen anywhere else that might tie in with these illustrations I'm giving here? Good, it was new to you too. Perfect. And I find that's what's exciting about this. It's not the old way of thinking about it. It's practical. It is practical. He recognizes you need to use the resources that you've been given. But sometimes we just have too narrow a definition of the resources. And I find that exciting. There are people here who are going to be able to give, well, let's put it this way. The treasurer of the diocese is here, and he may not like it when I say this to vestries. But this is what I say to vestries when they ask me about their giving to the diocese. Okay? And they say, well, Bishop, what do you expect us to do? And I said, it gets cast two ways. Bishop, what do you hope we're going to do? What do you expect us to do? And I said, I hope you're going to pay exactly what we agreed as the diocese you're going to pay. Okay? Okay, that's my hope. My expectation is, I really believe you're going to do the best you can do. That's my expectation. I really believe that God is moving you to be part of something bigger than yourself and to invite you to do that. And it may well mean that you're going to have to make some decisions about how you organize the funding and the resources, the currencies that you have. But my expectation is that you're going to do the best you can do. I really believe that people want to do that. And in the Episcopal Church and in this diocese, we are blessed because people do that. So, and Grace St. Luke's is a good example of it. I'm not blowing smoke, it's just true. Y'all have stepped up over and over again to do this. And as a result, you're a strong, healthy parish who takes a strong leadership role in the Diocese of West Tennessee because you give of yourself. And you give in response to the recognition that God has given a lot to you.